thanks for having me. So to be honest, I haven't got a speech prepared, but I'm just going to talk, and based on your smiles and yawns, I'm going to change the direction of my speech. So because I haven't got any material prepared, I'll just start with a brief, not so brief summary of my life, and you can understand my story, and then hopefully I can share with you some lessons that will come out of that I'm going to work at as I say it. So I thought I was going to be a journalist. I loved writing. And so I did the next logical thing and I studied accounting. And I became a chartered accountant, a CPA. I went to university studying business, but I had this passion for journalism. And so I decided, actually on the back of an envelope, when I was in Greece visiting family, waiting for my uncle to finish up his work, to come up with this newspaper that was going to transform Australia. And it was going to, change public opinion because all the media was corrupt. And so I came up with this idea of, going to print this newspaper and it's going to change Australia and, grow up from there. And got back to Australia and I found what we call a co-founder, a guy I went to school with, and his dad happened to own a printing press, which is handy. And we went door knocking. I dressed in this oversized suit. We'll be door knocking at all the local shops, and he'll be watching as I'm talking. So, yeah, don't say that next time. Say that. We managed to raise a few $1,000s, and we printed 5,000 newspapers that were 48 pages with colour. And we did everything from the production, the printing, the editing, the writing, and then and the distribution, which was a big lesson for me because we'd done all this hard work, and that's when I realised, as I was standing there in the cold handing it out to the students at Sydney University, that no one actually really cared what they were getting from me. And that's when I realised distribution is a really important thing for any business. And that's when I started thinking, wow, this internet is kind of cool. Like for about $5 a month, I could create the same content without the $4,000 or whatever it costs for us to print these newspapers. And so that's when I started experimenting with a website, and we actually started creating a weekly newsletter that was a huge hit on campus. I finished my degree and I got a job offer at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I managed to convince them to defer my contract, not just for the 1 year to finish my last year of university, but for another year so I could go traveling. And I thought to myself, I was 20, I was sort of growing up too quickly, I needed to just kind of slow down. So I decided what I thought was the smart thing to do, which was party for the next 9 months and spend all my money. So I backpacked around 25 countries, and I was thinking, I'm just taking a chill pill here on life, I'm just pausing. And it was probably one of the best things I ever did for my career. And to give you an example of what I mean, the discussions and the people I met, I remember being in Istanbul, and I was talking to a German who had grown up in Argentina, who was now working for an Indian company in Turkey, and he was telling me how he had read this book called The World is Flat, and we talked about a bunch of other things. So this was back in 2005 when the book just came out, and I remember reading that book actually a year later, and it completely changed my perception on things, because I kind of realised the emergence of China and India, the global economy, how what you're doing now is actually globally competitive, and you need to do something that's scarce, something that's going to make you an invincible, which is the term that he used. And what that book did is it kind of made me think globally. So there were a lot of things that I guess I learned backpacking. This is not a talk about backpacking, but that was a great life experience. And I guess the lesson out of that really is that don't always be trying to experience, because you never know the people that you're going to meet and the things that you might learn. So I get back to PricewaterhouseCoopers and I start a job in auditing, which is one of the most brain-dead monkey jobs you could ever do. And about 4 months into it, I kind of realised I was being treated like a monkey. Like, why did I go to university? And they made us feel special because like 1,000 people applied and only 60 got job offers, and we thought we're all hot shit. And we get in and we're just sort of like ticking boxes basically, doing photocopy runs. And I remember getting really frustrated, and I had this frustration with the fact that I had people coaching me who were morons, and I just wanted to learn. And I didn't have a way to learn. And I just wish I had something that I could read that captured all that soft knowledge in their head that wasn't documented in like manuals, so I could just sort of read up and then move ahead with some of the audit procedures and take a more senior role. So I got this idea to have a wiki. And I thought, why don't we just have a wiki for audit documentation? You know, there's different procedures and tests that we do when we just document how you do them. So I said it to my manager, you know, and I said, Em, I've got this idea. I reckon we need a wiki. She goes, what's a wiki? And I go, it's this thing where you can like share and collaborate and put your knowledge in. And she's looking at me, and she's kind of, not in a very positive way. By the time I finished, she wasn't very happy. And she just started yelling at me saying how stupid an idea it was, and why the hell you would ever want to do an audit wiki. And to her, in her language, she's kind of looking at me in a puzzled way and kind of smiling. And I go, so what do you think? She's like, I know this is exactly the same thing that you told me before, but for some reason, I really like this now. So, okay. So she gave me some advice. She goes, you know, go speak to that audit partner and then maybe you might be able to get approval. So I thought to myself, well, how about I just ignore her advice now and I'll just see if there's someone else I can speak to. And I found this innovation leader. And long story short, it turns out I had the solution to one of the biggest problems that the firm had. So PwC is a global knowledge firm. And as a knowledge firm, you know, you monetize off that knowledge. And when there was a global survey, which is how all the senior executives in the firm get measured, and they said, how are we at knowledge sharing and collaboration? And it turns out that I think the global average was like 65%, which is kind of a shitty score for a knowledge firm. But the Australian firm was like a whole 10 percentage points below that. So not only was PwC kind of shitty in the perception of the people for knowledge sharing, the Australian firm was even shittier. And so this innovation leader in the firm had been given the task by the CEO to solve that because of all the metrics he had. It's like, just fix it. And she's pulling out her hair and had no idea. And then out of nowhere, this pimply-faced 22-year-old goes, hey, I think we should have a wiki, you know? I think I can fix it. And what actually happened is I actually got informed about this problem. So I had this solution and I knew about this problem and I brainstormed with the guy that worked for her and he said, he just kept feeding me material. And over the next month or two, I created a pitch that eventually led to the CEO signing off on this cultural change program. And I effectively created a job for myself. I was given a time code and given complete free will to do whatever I want and to roll out this technology at PwC. Amongst 4 pilot groups. So there was a $30 million account group, there was a 200-person graduate skills program, an entire office, the Canberra office, and one other pilot group. And for 12 months I was to test out the technology, and if it worked, they'll roll out across the firm. And it worked, everyone was happy, and now it's become like one of the standard tools at PwC. But that was also a really valuable experience for me because I then kind of realized a whole new world to PwC and kind of my own passion. I really enjoyed the fact that I was doing something creative and doing something that wasn't just ticking boxes. And I kind of recognized I had an entrepreneurial side to myself. And so that's when I started networking in the Australian technology industry. I met a couple of people, I went to a couple of events, and fast forward a year, I created a thing called Silicon Beach Australia, which became the brand in Australia for all of Australia's entrepreneurial community. There's like 1,600 people on a mailing list, and there's weekly social events in Australia. And we wrote policy papers to the government telling them how to change government policy. Created a thing called the Data Portability Project, which is like an advocacy group, which has kind of died now, but it was big in 2008, where basically we told Google and Facebook they sucked and they needed to open up their data silos so that we could export our information out of it, which we're seeing now with a lot of companies. And then I met someone through the Data Portability Project, and he said to me, you belonged in Silicon Valley. And I was still working at PwC in audit, and he brought me over here and he said, I'll introduce you to 3 people. I met 2 of them. One of them was Naval Ravikant, who's of AngelList fame, I'm sure you all come across. Another one was Kevin Laws, who also works at AngelList and was the CEO of Vast. And they brought me over and I spent 2 years working at this search engine. So I was finally in tech, even though I've been thinking and talking about it for so long. And then I started StartupBus and which I'll talk about in a sec. I spent 2 years at Vast, and then I spent a year in Charles River Ventures, which I just finished up on. You might not have heard of CRV, but you might have heard of MIT. So CRV was created in the 1970s to commercialize research out of MIT. And my old boss, George Zachary, was the first investor in Twitter, Yammer, Millennial Media, which just IPO'd for $1 billion. George has become one of the most successful VCs in the industry. Jammer this year sold for 1.2 billion, and Millennial IPO for $1 billion, so he's doing all right. And now I'm here. So I also, along the way of working at Vast, I created a thing called StartupBus, which was a joke. At my last Silicon Beach drinks in Australia, I said, why don't we get on a bus, do a road trip to South by Southwest in Austin, and launch a startup by the time we got off the bus. And it was literally a joke with a friend of mine. We put our beer up and go, yeah, let's do that. So I flew to America and completely forgot about it. And I started kicking the idea again in January. I was thinking, well, maybe we should organise a road trip. It'd be kind of cool to try and build a startup on a bus. And then it was February, and I was like, well, I've really got to start looking into this thing because, you know, South by's in a month. And so I created a website with this like freeway, and like it's like 12 strangers on a bus have 48 hours to get to Austin and watch a startup, you know. And that was it. And then the next night I created a Twitter account, because that's what you do. And then on the third day, I get an email from TechCrunch going, what's StartupBus? I'm like, well, I'll tell you about it. And I started talking, you know, get some friends, and we're going to do a road trip, we're going to launch some startups. And as I'm talking, Lena's like, oh, I love this, I'm posting about it. I was like, oh, okay. And then I hang up the phone, and I'm sitting at my desk, looking at the accounting, and I was going, shit, TechCrunch is going to write that StartupBus now. And then before I know it, it's on TechCrunch at like 2 p.m. And then every minute for the next 6 hours, I was getting an email from someone who wanted to be on the bus, someone wanted to sponsor the bus. To give you an idea, it was going to cost about $20,000 to organise this trip. And I only just realised that like the day after the TechCrunch post. I had about $500 in my bank account. And so then I had people wanting to give up to $30,000 in sponsorship. I was like, wow. Turns out of that 30,000, I probably got about 5,000 of that. I had to find a bus, which is actually a lot harder than it sounds, because to get a bus with Wi-Fi and electrical outlets, there's not many of them. And I actually had to find enough quality, crazy people that were willing to do this. So, as you might have noticed, from an image on our website to 3 weeks later having this thing organised, it was like organising a wedding in a month. I did it. And my goal was just to break even, because I couldn't afford that, and to just see what would happen. And that's what I did. We did the maiden voyage, we had 25 people and 6 startups were created on it. And then when I did the first one, I didn't want to think about buses or anything for the next 3 months. But then I started getting people coming back, sending me emails going, you know, Elias, thank you. What? It was like, you changed my life. And I was, what are you talking about? So, well, I went on the bus, and then I got to Texas, and I met this guy at a party, and he offered me a job, and I was really frustrated with life, but this was a new opportunity, and so I moved my whole family from Australia to Texas, and now 12 months later I'm the happiest guy ever. It's like, wow, okay, I guess it did change your life. And then there were another half dozen stories like that, you know, and it really kind of, each story was kind of as powerful as that, where they literally just, their life changed because of someone they met, they got a job, or they got a new insight or something. I was thinking, wow, maybe I should do this again, you know. And so I did it again, and I was going, what's better than one bus? 6 buses. And you can't just have the bus come from the one city, that's kind of boring. Imagine, like, I looked at a map and I was like, bus from San Francisco, bus from New York, oh, we need one from Miami, we need one from the middle, Ohio. And so I came up with 6 buses, and we had 158 people last year go on it, and 38 startups were created. And we created a competition of like the best bus, the best tech region, so the New York versus the Silicon Valley tech community, as well as the best startup. And that was kind of powerful, seeing the competition element of it, which is kind of an experiment, but I saw the emotion in the room. And then we launched it in Europe last year, in December with 1 bus, and then we did it again this year with 11 buses and 300 people. And so it's just kind of accidentally turned into a business, I guess. At the same time, I started thinking, well, I don't want to be in the events business, and my goal isn't really to turn StartupBus into a business. I just get satisfaction out of the fact that I'm helping people. But how can I turn it into a business? And I came with the idea of StartupHouse. And so this is what I've been working on for the last 2 years. Once you get off the bus, you can then land in StartupHouse. And the idea behind StartupHouse originally was that you could live and work for free for 3 months, and then hopefully over time I could start investing in the people that were in StartupHouse and launch real startups. Because I don't believe you can create a real startup on a bus. I think it's like exercise for entrepreneurs. That's the goal of StartupBus. And so that's what I've been working on, and finally launched that, and then when I launched it in March this year, I realized there are too many incubators, and I decided not to do an incubator. And now we have, it's basically accommodation and workspace for entrepreneurs, and it's very much an MVP. I'm about to get a second property and hopefully bring all the learnings that we've got from this building, make it something better. So that's a bit of a background on what I've done. Now, as I was saying, there are a couple of lessons that I've learned along the way, and probably some things I haven't mentioned, like startups I tried creating that failed. And so the first lesson I've learned in my life was that know your customer. So when I was at PwC, I decided, you know, I had this crazy idea, and I just needed to do a startup. I found a technical co-founder, and we started building on it. We spent over the next year trying to build this thing. And, you know, we both really believed in the concept. The idea was that, you know, let's say you're reading Wikipedia and it says Sydney is the capital of the United States of America. And it's like, well, I don't think it is. This would be like a way where you could like fact check the information when you're looking at it. So you just click it and it tells you, no, that's bullshit. It's actually Washington, DC. So it just becomes like a way to verify information. And so then we started digging into like the semantic web and ontologies and how we can, you know, really get into the technical side of things on how to create something inside businesses of that. And we spent the next year just thinking about this. And then one day I went to this event, which was actually an entrepreneur event, not tech entrepreneurs, just entrepreneurs. And I was telling these two guys, we're watching someone on the stage pitching, and they're both asking me, and I was answering their questions. And one of them goes, so who's your customer? And I'm like, well, people that want to fact check, you know. They're like, no, who's actually going to, you know, pay for this? Who's going to use it? I was like, well, I guess researchers, journalists, students. And he kept badgering me until I came up with that. It's like, okay, good, thanks. And that's all he wanted to know. He just wanted to know who would actually use this product. So then I walked away from it. I was thinking, okay, journalists, researchers, students, they all don't have money. There's not that many of them. So as great as idea this was and how awesome it would be, the market was just too small. And that's when I decided actually to pull the plug on the startup. Even though we had been working on building this product, I just realized, what's the point? What's the point of building something when you don't have a market to sustain itself? So that's what I mean is know your customer. There's no point launching a business when you don't actually know who's going to be paying for it. A related thing that I've actually learned is that have a big vision. Think about something that's big, that's going to have a big impact. You know, and when I say, you know, a big impact, like think about like Udacity is going to try and offer Stanford level education for free to anyone in the world. That's just like, wow, that's a big vision. And you don't need to know who the customer necessarily is there, but you know it's just big and disruptive. So when I say know your customer, I also think about big vision, which is related to that. The second thing I've learned is that you need to just roll the dice in life. And the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you need to have a comfort with uncertainty. So when I did the first StartupBus, like I said, I had $500 in my bank account. It was going to cost 20 grand. I had raised about 12 grand at this stage. And it was about a week before the bus left. And so here I am facing, you know, about an 8 grand shortfall that I didn't really have, but I could have sort of somehow found a way to do it, you know, whether it was like a loan or something. And I just remember thinking, like, why am I even doing this thing? Like, it's kind of ridiculous. It's an expensive, ridiculous joke, basically. And my good friend Stephen, he was just going, like, dude, you've done all right so far, just roll the dice. I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll just roll the dice. And that's what I did, and I ended up raising enough money to cover it. And the same things happened with StartupHouse. I remember back in November, I was up to above my forehead in risk. I won't go into the issues now because that story is still unfolding. The amount of money I've had to put into it, the amount of battles I had to fight, everyone around me was going, dude, this is kind of risky. It's really risky what you're doing. It's not going to work. And it was completely just crazy to try and pull it off. Even though if you go to the building right now, it doesn't actually look like much of a building. It's pretty Spartan and you don't really appreciate some of the pain that went to getting that. And what really happened is I just persevered there because I just like, eventually I'll find a way. I knew it was just going to work out. And I think that's what makes someone a good entrepreneur. It's just the fact that you will work it out. You know, it'll just work out. I'll give you a completely unrelated example, which is sort of exemplifying the attitude I'm trying to say here. Back in my audit days, I was working on this section for a listed company, and I was doing like the payroll sections, auditing employee benefits and all that. And it was a big section, but it was low risk. So all my managers kind of did all the high risk stuff, like stock options or whatever. But they were all stressed because it was a messy client, and so I didn't want to distract the management, and I kind of held back, and I thought I'll just finish my work later. Anyway, everyone finished their work, except my work hadn't been finished. And so the director on the job, who's like pretty senior, she was like, "Can you please go in and just finish your work?" I'm like, "Yeah, no worries, I've just got to tidy up some documentation." And I remember going in, and it was like 9 AM, and I'm going, "Oh, hey Christine, like, oh, we'll just do this, and I can tie it off." And I start looking into it, and I start getting these documents, and I was like, "Oh shit, this doesn't make sense." And then as I started digging more into it, it just completely did not make sense. And so the 2 weeks of work I'd spent on it actually was completely flawed, and I was going to have to spend a whole lot more time I had to spend like another 2 weeks worth of work in the next 4 hours and work out a solution to this. Got to 4:30 PM, and I got the CFO of the company coming in. It's like, have you finished it yet? And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get there. And this is a listed company. If I didn't finish my work, the company would have been suspended from the stock exchange. So I was going to impact like people's money. And so I'm sitting at 4:30, the director's calling me up, the CFO's walking past, and at 4:30 I did not have a solution. It was just fucked. And I remember just thinking and going, shit, what am I going to do? And so what I did is I just like, well, I've got to finish it. I took a step back, and I'm not sure how I did this, but I just basically deleted it and started from fresh and just rewrote everything, but with a different approach. Finished it at 6 PM, hit complete, sent it to my director, and just crossed my fingers going. She was a really anal retentive also director. Like she was really particular about detail and technical standards on it. Anyway, I get an email from her later on, she's going, "This is some of the best work I've ever seen you do, thank you." And so I was just thinking, wow, there you go. But what actually happened there is like, I had this burden on me thinking it just couldn't physically happen. Just like with StartupBus, I didn't know how I was going to raise another 8 grand of money. With StartupBus this year, we had 11 buses. I didn't have the buses booked until 3 days the buses had departed. There was one day where I had to pay $50,000 to the bus companies, and I didn't have the money in the bank account. And I had another bus company saying they were going to charge an extra 30 grand, and if I didn't pay it, they weren't going to do the buses. And I had a bus company that was transporting 120 people, and they said they'll drop everyone off in Nashville if I didn't pay them another 20 grand. And I was just constantly dealing with shit. And some of these times I just felt like it just couldn't be solved. But I just realized a solution had to be found. So that's the thing, when you're an entrepreneur, you're dealing, sometimes you swim through crap just to get to shit, you know? And you're constantly just going and going. But the point is, just don't give up. Persistence is what really makes successful entrepreneurs. The Airbnb founders were living off like cornflakes and had tried 3 separate times to try and survive, and then they eventually did it. And there are dozens of stories of entrepreneurs, I don't know, they just had that persistence to just keep going. They believed in their vision. Again, there's a side step there, like sometimes you need to know when to quit, but there's also a difference from that and like just keep constantly not giving up, and not giving up on yourself, which is different from giving up on a product. The third thing that I've learned is that get an income, not a job. And I wish someone told me this when I was 15, because I went to this boys' school, and the right thing to do was to get a business degree, and I got a business degree, and the right thing when you do a business degree is to work at a big bank or a professional services firm like PwC. And I got into PwC, and the right thing to do then was to progress through management and get your life sucked out of you, and then just become middle management of a faceless organisation. Till one day I just realised I need to get out of here. And I wish I had someone back when I was 15 say to me, don't get a job, get an income. So when I created the Journalist Society at university and created this newspaper and online publication, I actually wanted to create a non-profit because I didn't want it to distract me from getting a real job. But if someone said to me, why don't you try and create an income out of this? That would have completely shifted my perception. I would have tried to work out how to make some money out of it. Likewise, when you apply that thinking with any project you do, I think there's a lot of status now with being a founder, I think, and not many people actually are founders. But at the same token, it's really scary to do something entrepreneurial. So just call them creative projects. Always be experimenting, just keep doing things. Just like throw pasta to the ceiling, just see what sticks. Doesn't matter if it doesn't have any relevance. It might be in 10 years' time that you realise how the dots connect. But right now, you're just creating dots. Just keep doing, just keep doing. And so, if you can just keep doing these projects, but also be thinking, well, how can I create an income source out of it? That's going to start making you think about the customers. It's going to start making you think about the revenue model. It's going to start making you think how you can prioritize your product pipeline so that you can satisfy those needs. And so by trying to think about how you get an income rather than a job, you're ultimately becoming more entrepreneurial. And I think one of the biggest crimes in our society, I call it Everest syndrome, is where we convince young, smart people to go work at these big corporations and get lost in middle management, and they get manipulated into thinking they need to rise up this career ladder. And I think what we need to do to really progress our society, and like I said, not everyone's a founder, but that doesn't mean, and not everyone should work in a startup, but I do think there are a lot of people that in the big corporate world that should be in startups. And I think what we need to be doing in our society is encouraging people to be working startups, to be scientists, to be researchers, to be uncovering new things, so that we can ultimately progress our society, increase our quality of life. The accounting industry is one of the biggest employers in the economy in Australia and as well as in America. And it's all based on, to be honest, useless regulation around reporting, which is outdated and is not relevant anymore. And so what we need is more people out of that world into this world. But at the same time, to do that, we really need to be thinking about how can we encourage people to do that. And so that's why I want to encourage you. You're all young. You're all obviously got the potential to do something like that. Don't get too caught up in being a founder, because it actually has its downsides as well. Don't get too caught up in being an entrepreneur, but just keep doing. Just keep doing creative projects. And whether that means you're good at creating something and then spinning it off and someone else running it, or you might find you have a passion for design, and you just love doing design, and you have a passion for talking to people, and you love doing sales. That's cool. But work out what you're passionate about, but until you work out what you want to do, just keep doing, because eventually it's all going to make sense. And so the story that I just gave in my life, I skipped over a few things, but there were a lot of random incidents that happened in it that led to the life I had right now. And it wouldn't have happened if I just if I just sort of didn't have an open mind to experiment and do different projects and to meet new people. And so I think I've been talking enough now. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
How old are you?
I'm 28.
So you planning to do another startup bus next year, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm a sucker for punishment. Yeah, I've been in meetings all day to do StartupBus America and StartupBus Europe, maybe StartupBus Australia. We'll see.
So has any of the startups that have, at the end of the trip, has anything happened to any of the startups that were created?
Yeah, I just got an email yesterday from a great designer who's telling me he's still spending time on waste bits, which was on StartupBus this year, and they actually didn't even make they made the semi-finals and they didn't make it to the finals, which I thought was a joke. The judges didn't know what I was thinking about, but they're still working on it. The goal of StartupBus though is, I guess the term is like rather than like an accelerator, like how we normally define it, it's a people accelerator. And so the concept I call is a foundry. A foundry is normally known as like Silicon Valley was started with foundries, where like raw materials created chips. They just produce these, chips. So a foundry, though, in my eyes, is something there where it's like a process can be applied. You step on the bus and you step off as a different person. You step on that bus with $10 and you walk off with $20. And so that's what really the goal for StartupBus is. I don't want to turn it into a business that makes too much money. I just want to make it a business that sustains itself, because I really want to see and to develop people to create effective startups. I gave a story on the first StartupBus which probably explains, I guess, that approach better. So around the time I did the first StartupBus, the night I created the Twitter account, or the week before that, I can't remember now, it was my first rugby training. I thought I needed to sort of balance out my life. I was working until 11 every night. So I joined a rugby team, because I've been wanting to do that for a while now. And I didn't know anyone. I had a good first rugby session, but because I didn't know anyone, I couldn't get a lift, and there were no taxis, so I looked up Google Maps and found a bus stop. So I'm sitting in this area in San Francisco, which I didn't really know, but it's a pretty dodgy area. It's like Hunter's Point. And as I was sitting there, I'm playing on my phone, and I noticed this girl just walked in front of me. And then she ran back. And I'm just thinking, it's kind of weird. And then I turned around and I saw this kid walking. And he was walking like this, and then he turned around the corner around the bus shelter, which was like a blind spot here. And as he turned like this, he lifted his hand up. His hand was covered. And he pointed something right into the temple of my head. And I didn't see it, but it was circular, metallic, and felt like a gun. And he said to me, okay man, hand it over. So situations like that, you don't learn about in university, you don't do that in HR training, you know, you just sort of like, it's just life, you know, shit happens. And so I reacted, I didn't have time to think. So what's really peculiar is the way I reacted, because it shows the impact of experience. I stood up, I looked at him, and I won't repeat the exact words, but you can probably work it out yourself, but I looked at him and I said, F you effing C! And so he just looked at me, and then he just ran off. And I ran into the middle of the road, and I was like, I'm gonna get you! And I was so angry. I was actually really scared, but I've never felt more angry in my life. I swear to God, if I saw that guy up that hill, I was just gonna chase right after him and bash his head into the floor. And so I had this anger, and I was just in the middle of the road, I want to get you where I am. And then the bus came, and I was like, all right, I better get on the bus. And I get on the bus, and everyone was like looking at me, maybe because I was looking at them. And I was like, are they trying to steal my phone? So then I like get on the bus and I get home, and I was like shaking. And anyway, what's really interesting about the story is that everyone says I was like a retard to do that. Like who says to someone who's pointing a gun at their head, fuck off, you don't do that. And looking back, if I had to do it again in slow replay, I actually would do exactly the same thing. It was brilliant what I did. And the reason why it was brilliant was because someone that's trying to commit crime is actually more scared than you are. You don't realise that. And when they've got control of the situation, as soon as you break control of the situation, they no longer have control. They get more scared themselves. So as soon as breaking their control, and the fact that I had broken control of his power over me by pointing the gun, he lost his control. By him running off and me going to the light, you know, he further had less control to do anything. He was more concerned about his own safety now because he could get caught. Now, that's kind of like a insight that, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, you can think about, right? And the reason I knew what to do is because I had crime committed against me before. So when I was 15, I was walking home, got onto the train station, and these three guys had been following me. As I sat down, they surrounded me and they asked me to hand over my wallet. So I did hand over my wallet. I let them take the cash, you know, 20 bucks or whatever it was. Then they got my ATM cards. They're like, okay, then tell us your PIN codes. And I was like, please don't do this. Now you're going too far. They're like, hand it over. And this one guy had like a broken arm, so he could have easily just whacked me. And so then I instantly just reacted. I was like, well, okay, I'll stand up. And I started yelling. I'm like, help! I'm getting rolled. Help! And so these guys freaked out. And they just started running. And they actually got caught. And I went to court to testify, and they ended up doing community service, like 60 hours. And so that was like one incident I had. And then when I went traveling around the world, I actually got befriended by a con man. And long story short, he had a gun and took money off me. And then the third incident I had crime committed against me was I had a Jeep Wrangler, and I parked it near King's Cross in Sydney, which is the nightlife area. But just behind King's Cross is kind of a bit of a dodgy area. There's a lot of homeless, and it's also a bit of a crime prolific area. So I parked it there, and when I got back later that night after having a fun night in the club, I realised my car had been broken into. And when I looked into it, they only actually had taken like my buzzer for the Harbour Bridge, but they didn't take the $400 GPS unit that was here and this other thing that was more valuable. And I remember just thinking like, why the hell didn't they just take that? It was obvious, it's just sitting there. And I reflected on it thinking, well, they're probably just trying to do a snatch and grab. There was like opportunity in the moment. They saw it and they just boom, in and out. Likewise, the guy that got me in Macedonia, I started thinking, why didn't he do that? How could I have reacted differently? And same thing with the guys that try to rob me. I wish I sort of did something different. So I reflected on these scenarios and I thought to myself, what if I did that? And so when a guy's pointing a gun at me here in San Francisco, you're never going to learn how to do what to do, but through the accumulated experience you have, you know what to do. And so what I said on the first startup bus is it developed my instinct. You know, my subconscious, my gut kind of knew what to do. And your gut is actually how venture capitalists make money. That's how I got coached at CRB to make decisions, because your gut just knows a lot more. And you can't explain it rationally yet, but your reaction just knows, you know instantly what to think. And so because of this accumulated experience, I just knew how to react to a situation. I thought about them controlling the power they had over me and how to break their power. And I just knew how to instinctively react. And so when I say constantly doing and constantly doing new projects, that's what's happening. You're building up your startup instinct. You know, you don't realize it, but 10 years down the track, it's going to become really useful. And I can't even begin to list the amount of things that I've become good at, but I didn't realize it was because I did that 5 years ago on this random project that just became useful now. Just like with people that you meet, you know, like with Silicon Valley, they say that you always need to treat someone well, because you never know when you're going to be working with them, and it's so true. Anyone in tech, you know, just today I've officially hired someone to help work with me on something, and I met him like 5 years ago, and we worked together on different projects, and he was more senior than me on things, and he's older than me, and now he's had a problem with his startup, and I'm helping him get a job. And to be honest, if he asked me that a year ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I would have laughed at him. I wouldn't have thought that was impossible, but it's just what happens. And so, the relationships you build and the experiences you have, there will be future implications of it. Which is, you know, I was also thinking maybe something I should talk about today is like some of the rules and businesses I've learned. In business, like one thing, never do business with someone unless they have good integrity. And this is an example of it, because only people that have been screwed over by other people really appreciate this point. But like, when you work with someone, if you treat them badly, they'll remember that. And that will get you back one day. It's karma. It's going to happen. Always treat people well, and only deal with people that respect integrity. But it goes back to the fundamental point, like you never know what's going to be happening in the future. And always be thinking, you know, long term in that sense. Sorry, that was a really long answer. Yeah.
You mentioned that one of the businesses, you decided to just scratch it because the market was too small.
More than one.
Okay. But isn't there a fine line between realizing when a market is too small or when you can expand a market?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends what you mean by expanding a market. Trying to educate a market is a really hard thing to do. I mean, without answering that question directly, yeah, I think first you need to work out what your goal is. Like, are you trying to build $1 billion business? Are you trying to build something that's going to impact 1 billion people? Are you going to, like, what is your actual goal for the business or the project that you're doing? I know this one company, Australian startup, that just raised $1 million, and I asked the founder, what's your goal with it? And he listed 4 different things. None of them had to do with the company. It was just what the product he was going to solve was going to do. And his 4th goal was, I want to actually, you know, once I do that, that, and that, then I'm going to be able to have software that can automatically heal itself. And so it can just run itself and fix itself. Imagine your iPhone breaking down and it knows exactly what to do to fix itself. And I go, and then what? What do you know after that? It's like, I'm done. I'm happy. And good on him. He actually knows what his goal is. And so by understanding what you're trying to get at, I think is really important to answering questions like that. So is it, like you can say on a generic level, is it, you know, should you think about expanding markets and all that? Like, yes. But is your vision to change the world? If you're trying to make $1 billion, you need to do something that's destructive. So I would argue it's better to do something that already exists, but you're doing it better, like more efficiently. Google wasn't the first search engine. In fact, Google search was very commoditized. Facebook wasn't the first social network. I mean, I remember when MySpace was huge in 2003, and Facebook was created in 2004. So a lot of successful businesses that I've seen in Silicon Valley have actually had previous trends or previous behaviors and patterns, but they just did it better. And that's part of the role of innovation. Like with innovation, you're throwing pasta on the ceiling, you're just seeing what sticks. And so the first guy has the first mover advantage, but they've also got the legacy that comes with all these failed experiments and that baggage. So yeah, trying to expand a market, hard thing to do. It's doable. Depends on really what your goal is, I guess.
I'm at that point that I have to choose between like even having my own startup or working with a startup and then going to a big business and like you're saying, following the career ladder and becoming middle management. And I agree with you in the point that someone shouldn't do it, or like at least not so many people should do it. But don't you think people need more corporate experience before doing their own startup? You think someone that has some entrepreneurial skills should go ahead and just do their startup right away?
It depends on your personality type. I think people that are very structured in their thinking tend to thrive in bigger environments. People that are very unstructured and creative types tend to hate that environment. So that answer really comes down to what your personality type is. I actually think the big company thing is a huge lie that we're making to ourselves in society. And I'll give you an economic justification for it. So there's this concept called economies of scale. So the concept is like, the bigger you get, the lower your unit cost. You just keep growing like that, your profit yield exceeds, right? But for anyone that studied economics, you know there's a related economies of scale, which is the diseconomies of scale. When you get too big, each marginal unit increase in production actually results in higher cost. And so you actually become more efficient the bigger you are. Our whole society is based on growth. It's on GDP, it's on profit. It's about more, more, more. I remember at PwC, it's like we achieved 15% revenue growth. It's like awesome. But like, you can't just keep going up. You're eventually going to go down. And just because you're going up, eventually it's going to start getting inefficient. And you see that in big corporations with the communication costs. They've got to create whole divisions and whole products just to enable people to talk to each other because there's opportunity cost with the fact that they're so big. And so I actually think the big company thing is a legacy of our society that needs to change. And I think the future is really more of a network. The way Silicon Valley was explained to me was it's just like a big company. It's kind of like in a big company, like PwC in Australia had 5,000 people, 150,000 people globally. Huge. And all these different business units, like my business unit in Sydney was 200 people alone. And then there was another 200-person business unit, and there's another with 5 people, whatever. But what happens is you just got these separate teams, and that's exactly what Silicon Valley's like. Everyone's kind of working on their own thing, but we're all broadly aligned on the same thing. And so my old, Kevin Laws, one of the guys that brought me to America, that's how he explained it. He had worked at a big company, so that's why he had that insight. So working here in Silicon Valley is just like a big company. You start working with people that you previously knew. You pull people over. Things die and you move to the next thing. You just kind of know each other. And again, to go back to your point about whether it's worth working at a big company or not, I think the big company is going to kind of die. And what's going to happen now is Silicon Valley is exemplifying a new form of business in society, which is a network of businesses. So a network of small lifestyle businesses, startups, whatever, people that all kind of know each other by industry vertical or whatever, and they just keep jumping along. Like in Silicon Valley, if you lose your job, that's not the end of your career. You just move to the next startup. Now, your career traditionally is defined as like you're working at one company. That's what the baby boomers were told, and you just keep working at this ladder. But the new career is like you work out what you want, and that startup might fill it for 6 months, the other one will fill it for 2 years, whatever. But it's your career, and you just jump along. And I think the future actually is going to be smaller. It's a lot more satisfying working in a smaller team. And I think everyone will agree with that. Anything that gets too big, and I don't know what the magic number is. Like I think 12 is a good number for a team, but they say Dunbar's number, which is 150, is when things start getting complicated in an organisation. But there is a certain point where it just gets too big for an organisation. And I think that's just bad and needs to change. But the future will be smaller. Now, whether that is like smaller teams in a big company or that network of startups I'm saying, I don't know. But I think big companies have it wrong because they all think about getting bigger, and they're not. That's wrong. And I think there's a lot of value in working at a big company, but the things that you learn at a big company are different from what you need in a startup. So an example of that, I actually had to unlearn for a year working at a startup the things I'd learned at PwC. Because when you're working at a big company, you're learning how to defend a revenue stream. You're thinking analytically. When you're trying to start a business, you're thinking more complementary. You're trying to think, well, if that goes there, then maybe that can join up with that, and we can link up with that. And you kind of have a creative way of thinking, which is different from analytical thinking, which is just breaking things down into their components. And so analytical thinking is great when defending revenue streams, but will kill when you're trying to create revenue streams. You need a different skill set, a different way of thinking. And so working at a big company actually will train you to think analytically, which, don't get me wrong, very useful. But if you're a 2-person startup, you will fail if you think analytically, I think. So I think it's good to get a few months, 6 months, maybe 12 months, if you want that generic, broad experience, like how I pursued my career. But if you know you want to be in a startup, just be in a startup now.
Great.
Sorry, I already asked me. Somebody else already has a question. I don't know. You were talking about getting bigger. You moved startup bus from 1 bus to what, eventually 11 buses?
Yep.
Across multiple countries. Can you talk about problems involved in scaling that, or what that was like?
Yeah. It was really painful this year. We grew really quickly. I mean, we haven't decided yet what we're going to do, but we're probably going to cap StartupBus. It's going to be an annual competition, so it's still going to keep going. But I think 12 buses, 300 is about as big as it should get. There was a big difference with this year to last year. From the P&L to the complaints that we got to the community and all that, it was funny just seeing on multiple dimensions how they all correlated. There actually wasn't that much of a benefit of being double the size. And I don't know what the right number is, but again, like the fact that I don't have the goal of making StartupBus a big billion-dollar business, I think helps the fact that I can control the quality and make it go a certain direction. You know, I'm personally, I want to be careful the people that run StartupBus now that's getting bigger have that same thinking, because I mean it's pretty demotivating to think you're working at a company and it's not going to get big because you're not going to make money out of it. So it's a different type of psychology that you need to have, I guess. But yeah, like the thing about bigger is it's not necessarily better. It might make your ego feel better that you've got like a bigger empire or something. But it's also, like this year with StartupBus, I had 40 people reporting to me. And if I spent an hour a week catching up with everyone what they were working on, I wouldn't get any work done. You know, it's just how do you keep in touch with 40 people? And even though I tried to decentralize the management a bit, they all ended up having to go through me. And it just I became a huge bottleneck. So, yeah, we'll see what's happening with StartupBus. Like I said, my original goal with StartupBus was to help it lead into StartupHouse, and because there are so many incubators now, I'm trying to rethink now. Well, that was what I was trying to work on, and everyone's trying to do that, so it kind of devalues what I'm doing. So I'm kind of rethinking now the direction to take everything. But I know StartupBus has become a valuable thing, so I'm just going to keep it going. In terms of what direction it goes, we'll see. But trying to make it too big, I mean, a bigger revenue line also means a bigger expense line. And the ultimate way to judge the success of a business is through the customer feedback. And if people start getting to get dissatisfied, you should listen to that. I mean, Carly Fiona, who ran Hewlett-Packard, she knew, I think it was Dell. I remember back in 2002, Dell was at its height and she was still rising, and she said she knew back then that Dell was just going to start falling. And the reason for that was because of the customer feedback scores. You know, I can think of a bunch of other businesses. Well, actually, I'll give one business right now, Rackspace. I love Rackspace, and all their customers love Rackspace. And Rackspace invests in support because they know happy customers are happy customers, and that's ultimately what matters. And the ultimate success of a business is on the satisfaction of the customers. So with StartupBus, if we start making it too big and people get frustrated from the experience, then what's the point? It's going to mean long-term decline. It takes a lot of work to build up a brand. It's very easy to kill it. And I'm very conscious of that, I guess.
I've got a question on a slightly different topic. It's about sort of businesses in Silicon Valley being sort of cloned in different parts of the world, particularly sort of emerging worlds. And you know, you sometimes see online sort of offers for cloning. You know, you can get a clone for Pinterest for $50 and that kind of stuff. What's your viewpoint on sort of cloning in different parts of the world? Do you think they're parasites and vultures, or do you think that's nice and creative? Do you have any views on either?
I mean, anyone that's done something knows it's all in the execution, and you can copy the look of something, but it's like taking a photograph. It doesn't mean it's going to work. I think, yeah, it's kind of like StartupBus is an example. I just found out about the 5th copycat of it, and it's just like, fuck. We're not even trying to create a business out of this. I think just join us and we do it together. And it's kind of, from a creative point of view, it's frustrating. Creative people tend to want to feel like it's theirs, and no one else can copy it. But from a business point of view, like, it's smart business to copy something. You know, like, if I was to tell you, fruit shops can make $1 million a year, you just need to sell that particular inventory in that way. What's stopping you from doing it anywhere else in America or around the world? Like, it's my own fault that I can't grow and scale to that. So you're an entrepreneur and identifying a model and you can scale it. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, Rocket Internet in Berlin, ironically the guy that copied StartupBus in Germany works for Rocket Internet. But the business model of Rocket Internet is any Silicon Valley company that's raised more than $20 million, they'll copy it, just blindly. Airbnb, he's right now setting up the, what's the shoe one?
Zappos.
Sorry?
Zappos.
Yeah, in Azerbaijan. And so he's just copying all these models and they're just building it in all the different countries. But they won't do under 20 million because that's immoral. You know, like, you don't copy a smaller business. But that's their business. And it's like, well, good on you. It's kind of smart. Like, why does Amazon care about Azerbaijan? I mean, they probably put their noses up at it. But why should the Azerbaijanis sort of miss out on innovation? You know, like, I mean, Australia has a market of 22 million people, and it's an advanced economy, but you just, little things that exist in the US economy just don't exist. Like, I remember visiting my sister in London, and you had digital radio. You could actually see the song on the radio, which right now is like, duh. But like back in 2002, I remember thinking it was the coolest thing ever. Australia only got that like a few years ago. And it's just because like, the people that have the technology, they're like looking at markets, they're like, oh, America, money. China, money, Australia, fuck it, you know. And so a lot of people that are trying to like copy these business models, I actually think they're doing a good thing because, you know, technology has the potential to improve our quality of life. And that ultimately should be the goal of everything we do. How do we improve our quality of life? Which is different from improving our living standard, because that's purely income. And if they're bringing innovation into a local economy, awesome. And like sucked into the person that came up with it for not thinking about that. It's like, that's their cost for not moving. So, from a creative point of view, I can understand it. But, you know, all these StartupBus copycats, like I've made a decision, for example, with the team that we do it once a year and we focus on big, broad competitions in America and Europe. And, you know, I've had requests from North Africa to Spain to Australia to India to many more countries to do it. Someone wants to do it in India, like, fuck, good on them. Like, they're creating value. It's my fault for turning my nose up at India because I'm so busy trying to do the existing stuff. If actually, the reason why StartupBus Europe started is because someone was going to copy it, and I was like, fuck, okay, we've got to just do it, otherwise someone else is going to do it. So it actually prompted me to do it. And if it wasn't for that threat, I probably would have left it. So.
Thank you. I have a question. So, you mentioned that you had the feeling at 20 that you were growing too fast and you were done with university and you were at PwC already and had all these projects and plans. And you had your gap year, right? Or 9 months of fun. Those were really useful. Would you recommend somebody like us to do something like that?
Well, actually,
was it actually useful for your future career?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Like, I've got so many interesting stories to say. Like, I can meet someone and they're like, I'm from Iran. I'm like, oh, I've been to Shiraz, yeah, and I went to that thing. It's like, oh, I'm from Latvia. And I'm like, oh, I went on that slippery dip there. You know, like, I've just got stories. And it just makes me interesting. And that's useful in business, you know? So, travel is actually a great thing for business. It's also great for making you realize things about the world. Like, I've never been really a racist person. But when I went traveling, I literally obliterated any sense of racism in my body. Because I just realized all humans are fundamentally equal. We all eat, we all shit and have sex, you know, like we're all the same. We all want the same things in life, you know, and just because we look, and it took me to travel to kind of appreciate, like I remember when I went to Iran actually, my family wanted to excommunicate me. Like every day they're on the phone, I caught a bus in Turkey. Maybe that's why I love buses. I travel around Europe in buses. But I traveled through Turkey to Iran, and every day I was getting calls on my cell, like, don't do this, and I actually just recovered from pneumonia. Like, you're going to kill yourself if you haven't recovered from pneumonia. And I went to Iran, and it was the best country I've ever been in all my life. And the media had been talking about September 11, and like Muslims are like terrorists and all that. And I think Islam is a beautiful religion. But it took me that experience to realize that. And it just, what it does, it taught me to think like maybe how a Muslim thinks about the world, which is just different. It's not worse or better, it's just different. So travel gives you perspective. If I had my time over again, I'll take semesters off and go traveling. I'll travel every summer holidays. I'll spend all my money traveling. And I would have taken a year off between high school and university and did what I already did, which is take a year off between working full time and studying. And I also think travel is a lifelong thing. I don't think you can just, I thought I could just travel for a year and get out of my system and then I'll be good. And I kind of did. I probably traveled for too long. 9 months is too long. I think 2 months is perfect. 1 month is too short, 3 months is too long. Because you run out of money and you get sick. And 1 month you're kind of itching to sort of do more. But 2 months is about right. And I think like this, every 2 years I feel like I need to get away for a bit. It's sort of like, it's kind of like fuel for the soul. You know, you just get this new perspective. So you shouldn't think of travel as something you just do when you're young and you're done with it. I think it's something you do for the rest of your life. But travel as much as you can. It's hard to explain the benefit you get from it. But you know, if you were to simplify it, people that have travelled tend to be open-minded. Like I would say, a lot of the people on StartupBus, like because we had 840 people apply, and we only accepted say 272 of them this year. And so you look at, there's a common personality type that wants to apply for StartupBus and sort of gets through, and they also all happen to be backpackers, which is kind of interesting. And I think, and it's kind of, I remember seeing on the bus like conflict, and some people just like, they just resolve conflict better because they're just like, yeah, they're just calmer and they knew how to handle it. And it's kind of like a skill you learn when you're backpacking. I'm naturally not a very cunning person. I'm very innocent. But I learned to understand how cunning people think when I travel because I had people try to take advantage of me. And so it made me a lot more street smart. That's a benefit I came out, you know. It made me more of a man. I don't know how you can explain that, but I came out a different person out of it. You know, just from in all regards of life, how I thought about things. So travel as much as you can. Yeah.
Anyone else? Is there a limit? You mentioned that if you take on a co-founder, make sure it's a person that has integrity. I've been in San Francisco 3 weeks, and I have a business model that not all entrepreneurs can grasp quickly. So I came across one guy, and he was pretty much doing the exact same thing. As soon as I explained how my services work, I mean, it's like a light bulb just went off, and man, this is great, and so on and so forth. But should there be enough time? I mean, am I rushing it to say, okay, fine, I finally found someone who understands this. Let's go get it, or should it be more of a thing where let me get to know you 3 months later, 6 months later, I can determine if we need to be partners or.
Yeah, no,
that's a gut feeling thing.
Yeah, no, a few things on that, which is backed by friends of mine that have burnt themselves doing it. The first thing, and I just gave this advice actually to someone this week, do a project first together. Work with them together for a month, because you're going to really see what they're like. After that month, you're going to get a different insight into them, and then you can make more of a commitment. So don't jump straight away into a long-term commitment. Just stage the commitment. So do some short-term projects together and see how you work together. And I just believe that in any case. You need to work with people to really understand them. Second thing is, you don't know people until you see them at their worst. And I remember years ago dating a girl, for example, and I thought she was amazing. But it wasn't until a year later where she had some hospital issue, and I saw her like drugged up, and I just saw a different side to her. And I could understand why she acted like that, but just a different side, and it gave me a completely different perception on her. And it was only because I saw her at her worst. We're still in touch and all that, but I just kind of realised this chick's not really for me. So you could apply that sort of advice to anything in life. You don't see people until the worst. The third thing with a startup is vesting. It's a great concept. So never do 50-50% and like you get it straight away, because let's say in 3 months' time or in a year's time they turn out to be dead weight, and they might be awesome, but just something happened a year later where their motivation changes, or a significant event in their life happens, like a parent died or their partner died or whatever, and they just change thinking, and you're now carrying the workload of this person. You need to sort of plan for that scenario. So even if they actually are awesome, which is what you're trying to consume your thinking of, like are they awesome? You need to think about, well, even awesome people change taste later. Like I know as an employee, I was very different in the first year of all my employment and all my employers than I was in the subsequent years. Because what happens is you get excited, it's the honeymoon period, and then something just snaps and you're just like, wow, okay, it's just work, and then you just go like that. And so with vesting, make sure you always set it up so that you have 4-year vesting, and with a cliff, with a 1-year cliff. Because that way you can be working together for a year. If they quit within a year, which happens, they don't steal your future work. And they have to keep working for 4 years for them to accrue all the benefit. So vesting is a really good concept in sort of preventing that problem, I think. And it's key, and I think people need to make sure they bake that into all agreements. So I think we've hit 7:30, so over time now.
I think we're good. Yeah, no more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.